I'm going to run through a brief video today about the dispatching and the scheduling functions of the Pantonium system. So what I'm going to do is really show a day in the life of how a dispatcher would not only put in their trips, but also use the system to optimize their routes and dispatch in real time as well. So in order to do that, we first have to really set the stage, which is how we put our imports into the system. So I'm going to go in our demo environment to our admin role here, and we're going to talk a little bit about, before you even start using the system, how you're going to put in inputs that the system is going to use to intelligently route. So the first thing that we can do here in our admin role is we can go to the riders, and we can look at all of our given riders here. We can start typing in the name of one of them, and we can populate their details. But what we can also do is we can put in a new rider. So we can obviously load their name, date of birth, mobility status, escort, comments, as well as their address that can be geocoded. One of the important things to our scheduler that I'll point out here is basically our rider group. So what we have the ability in our system is to associate each one of our riders or your clients with a specific rider group. For instance, if you have contracts with certain hospitals or certain schools or different programs, and for billing reasons, when you do multi-riding or multiple capacity, you only want those particular riders to ride with others of the same program, we can associate that with a rider group. And then when the system does its optimization, it'll make sure that riders in that group are always going together and not with others from outside. So this becomes really important if you want to maximize and do multi-loading, is that we can make these restrictions so that it keeps it within certain groups. Other things we can do from our admin role here that are important to down the line when we're doing our scheduling is through our vehicle attributes. So we can see all of our vehicles that are here, whether or not they're active in the system. We can see their configurations. So really, the system is trying to maximize the capacity of our vehicles. And in order to do that, obviously, first we must know what the capacity is. So on our system, we can load in how many stretchers, how many passengers, and how many wheelchairs each one of these vehicles can take, as well as what combination of each it can accommodate. For instance, if I have one wheelchair in, how many passengers can I then take, so on and so forth. So the system will use these factors to try and maximize this capacity and make sure that we're doing as many multiple loads as possible given our current fleet. One thing that we'll also see here is cost factor. Different vehicles, of course, have different costs. If you have a minibus that takes 25 passengers, that's a more expensive vehicle for you to run than a sedan that takes 4. That means that in the system, we can associate a different cost factor to it. So if all things are equal, if you have one trip that needs to be assigned, the system will send a sedan rather than the minibus because it has a lower cost factor. So it's cheaper for you as an operator to send that sedan. So, with that being said, there are a lot of factors that go into the optimization, that go into our scheduler, and we'll talk a lot more about those constraints a bit later in this video. But for right now, I'm going to take it back one step, and we're going to talk about exactly how you schedule your trips, so how you go through an order entry process. So in our system, there are basically two main ways to do order entry. The one is obviously the most simple, which is someone's going from point A to point B. This is how we enter that trip into the system. So I'll just go here and we'll create a fresh one. So what it does is obviously we have our patient field here, and if we start typing in the name, it'll automatically populate from our client database. So if we pick one, what you'll notice is that it automatically will put in all their information, including the account or the rider group that they're going with. So this is who this particular client is billable to, and if necessary, if you set those parameters, when we do the optimization, this person will only travel with other people from the same account or the same group. And you can see here it autofills all of our pricing information as well, because we do price within the system. However, that's not something we're going to go over in this particular video. So we have our particular patient, and we have their location 1 and their location 2. Now, if this person's home address is saved within the system, it'll automatically populate it here, or it'll give us the option to select it as a location 2. In this case, I'll just go to healthcare facility, and I'll start typing one, and it'll draw from our database of facilities that are in the system, and it'll automatically populate its address. We'll select a second location and automatically populates its address. So from here, all we have to do is we check the ETA. And what this does is it's a safety system for an operator. So if they're on the phone and they're trying to confirm a trip, what this does, the check ETA button will scan all of our existing schedules and all of our existing trips, and it'll actually let the order entry person know that given the time that we've set, it'll let us know if there's a vehicle that's capable of doing this trip. If not, it'll let us know that, and it'll give us the option to schedule another vehicle for this trip. But it just ensures that before we make any commitments, we have the necessary resources that can cover that trip. What we can also do from here is we can hit Get Quote, and based on the pricing that's loaded for this account, it'll actually calculate a quote for how much it'll cost to go from point A to point B, and if necessary, that is something that you can quote to the caller or quote to the account. Once we've hit one of these, you don't have to hit both, just one, you can confirm the trip and you can proceed with putting it into the system. So that's really the most basic way to do order entry. As you can see, it's a lot of the information, if not all of the information, is auto-fillable. So it draws on our existing database and it just limits the amount that your order entry people have to manually put in when they're going through this process. It'll take less than a minute. They can put a trip in because all the information is stored within the system. Okay, so the second main way that we do order entry in the system is through our standing orders. So if you have a particular client who they go to the same program every single day, or they have dialysis, or they go to the doctor once a month, or whatever it may be, whatever time period, you don't necessarily want to have someone every single day put that order in. So what we have is we have our order calendars. So if you have a person, they go to a program every day, again, we put their name in and it fills it in. And let's say this is a weekly program and they're going every Monday through Friday every single week to the same location. We put the frequency, we put the starting times, we have a start date that can be associated with it and an end date. So if the program is finite, it's 6 months or a year or 2 years, whatever it might be, we can associate an end date. If not, it'll be infinite within the system until we choose otherwise. We can exclude certain days, certain holidays, certain months if they're going to be on vacation, etc. And once we've put in all of our details, all we do is we select OK, and it becomes one of our order calendars. So we know that for a specific client, every single Monday through Friday, they're going to go into the same program, and it's going to be billable to the same account. Okay, so now we've gone through our two main ways of doing order entry. It's time to really talk about what a dispatcher is going to do on a daily basis and how they're going to create these schedules. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to our optimization, and this is really the heart of the system, and this is how we're going to create efficiency, both cost and time efficiency, and just trim our costs. So we have is a constraint-based optimization. So it assigns penalties to certain constraints and it associates costs with them to you as a business, and it tries to minimize those costs. Now we've made the system really intuitive as it allows you to really get whatever benefit you want from it as an operator from the system. So you have maneuverability, you can change certain penalties based on what's important to you as a business. So as a general rule, the higher the penalty or the higher the severity, the more important it becomes to the system, and the higher cost the system associates with breaking that. So it becomes a more important factor when we're trying to schedule. A few things that we have here, obviously the number one thing is mileage. We're going to try and reduce mileage as much as possible, and that's a given. But what our system does on top of that is all these other factors that contribute to your cost that are more than just mileage and fuel. For instance, we have ride time penalty. So if your goal as a business is to do multi-capacity and to take as many people in your vehicle as you can, then ride time penalty becomes a very important part of that. Because you don't necessarily want the first person who gets into your vehicle to be in there for 3 hours while you pick up and drop off the 10th person. You need to have some kind of penalty associated with that so that you're running people in the vehicles who have relatively short waiting times. So we can associate a high penalty to that if it's important. If it's not as important and we just want to get as many people in the vehicle as possible, we would make the ride time penalty more slight or more moderate. And other things such as vehicle penalties. So, this example, I have 55 vehicles and I'm doing it on 55 trips and doing it on 8 vehicles. Maybe I don't want all 8 vehicles to have trips. Maybe I want to minimize the amount of vehicles that I use on these trips, and I want to take vehicles off the road. Well, then what I would do is I would associate vehicle penalty with very severe, and the system would associate the cost to each additional vehicle as being very, very high, and as a result, it's going to try and minimize the amount of vehicles that we're doing these 55 trips on. So if your vehicle utilization is the most important factor, you would create this vehicle penalty to be very severe, which is what I'll do in this case. There's a whole host of other constraints and other penalties, and I won't go into all of them, but as an operator and as someone who's doing the dispatching, you really have a good feel of all these different factors, and you can tailor your results to get exactly what you want day in and day out. And once you find something that works, you can hit save, and it'll just always be your given settings. So that being said, I will run it now. We'll just hit start here, and it's going to take all of those 55 vehicles, trips, and 8 vehicles, and it's going to run through all the possible combinations, and it's going to try and find the most cost-efficient one and the cheapest for my business, given the penalties that I've associated. Now remember, I put vehicle penalty as a very severe thing here. So it's going to try and do these 55 trips in the fewest amount of vehicles as possible so I can take some of my vehicles off the road. So we can see it's well over halfway done. This whole process, it doesn't take very long at all. And this is scalable, so it'll work as well for 500 trips on 80 vehicles as it does for 55 and 8. So as soon as it's done, what it'll do is it'll assign the trips to the vehicles, and it'll start to build schedules that I'll show you. So it's just going and it's assigning these routes, and now that it's done, what I can do is I can just hit show visuals, and we'll see the type of results that we were able to get. Okay, so what we can see is we had 8 vehicles. Now I'm just going to go back here, and you can see our first 5 vehicles have no trip scheduled to them. And there's only 3 out of our 8 who have trips that were assigned. So what the system was able to do is we had 55 trips and we gave it 8 vehicles, but it was able to cut 5 vehicles from the schedule altogether. So it did all those trips on only 3 vehicles because this was the fewest that it could do, and it maximized our capacity. So I mean that's a really good result. We only have 3 vehicles running. I can click on any one of these, and what it'll do is it'll populate a full shift for that vehicle for the entire day. So we have all of their pickups and drop-offs, the rider's name, the appointment time or the appointment window, preliminary GPS numbers, so we can see exactly when they're supposed to get there based on the GPS, idle time, we have handling time that's built into the schedule, as well as the address, of course. So one thing that you can see here is, obviously, if we're doing all of these 55 trips with 3 vehicles, there was a lot of multi-loading that happened here. So we can see, for instance, we had a pickup of 10, we had a pickup of rider 7, and then we dropped off 7. We picked up 12, we dropped off 10, we dropped off 12. So you can see in the schedule, the system, because it had to do these trips on the fewest amount of vehicles, it made the most out of those vehicles. And it tried to do multi-capacity as best as it could, and it tried to make sure that at any given time, we really had as many people in the vehicle as were possible given our schedule, and that's what we were able to accomplish. So this is how you build the schedule and how you manipulate it and how you get the results that you want. The next thing to show would really be how you deal with on-demand trips. Things that come up the same day, if there's certain cancellations, if there's delays, anything, you would need a way to do it on a case-by-case basis. And that's what we have with our assisted dispatch. So what a dispatcher would look at here is we have a list of all of our trips. Number 1 would be this is the top priority trip, and number 55 would be this is the lowest. So number 1 is this has the appointment time that's closest, the schedules, their location, etc. This is the dispatcher's number 1 scheduling priority. So all they would have to do is click on the number, And what it does is it gets candidates. So given all those penalties and all those factors that we just talked about with our optimization batch engine, this on a case-by-case basis uses all the same metrics and gets us candidates for who can do that trip. So it scans all of our vehicles, all of their schedules, and it tells us who can do this trip given their existing schedule. And once again, it makes it easy. It ranks it for us in terms of 1 being the best option, down through 11, this is not a very wise option. So as the dispatcher, you put faith in the system. You can see the status, the driver, the ETA, all of that. And we just hit status here, and we confirm the trip. And it's going to assign that trip. And then as soon as it does this, the driver is going to get a notification on their mobile device immediately that they have a new trip, and they'll have all the details of that trip. So a process like this takes all the guesswork out of it for the dispatcher. It's really just point and click dispatching. They do the top one on the list, they get candidates, it scans for who can do the trip, and they just assign it. And then it's as easy as that. They don't need to know what their existing schedule is because the system knows that. They don't need to know the traffic in the areas because the system knows those things, and it's constantly updating that information, and it's allowing the dispatcher to just make easy decisions based on the system's recommendations. Okay, so the last thing that I want to go over here would really be what a dispatcher is going to look at throughout the day and how they're going to monitor their fleet. So what we have is we have our vehicle locations map. This is a map that's updated automatically every 1 minute. We use Android devices that piggyback off of the GPS transmitters in those devices that send us data every minute. And we have an app that loads on it that allows dispatchers to communicate with their drivers in real time automatically as well. So we can monitor live traffic, if there's construction, and we have all of our vehicles here that are color coded based on their status, whether they're available, they're currently running within a trip, etc. So what I'll do is I'll just click on any one of these vehicles and it'll populate a schedule for that vehicle. This is a schedule that we pre-built obviously within our optimization. So we have the starting time, we have the different pickups, the different drop-offs, we have their appointment time, we have plan time, so this is their GPS ETA that's constantly recalculating and recalculating. We're constantly trying to find what their ETA is, and it's not static, it's something that is reflective. And we have actual time. So this is based on the timestamp. This is when they actually arrived at their location. What we can also do is we can hit the GPS tab up here, and we'll be able to see at any 1 minute in time exactly where that driver was, how fast they were going, when they completed their tasks, so on and so forth. So from a vehicle monitoring standpoint and accountability standpoint, your dispatchers have a really good sense of everything that's going on, and they don't have to rely on the driver to tell them where they are, if they're going to be late, if they had to take a detour. These are all things that they can monitor in the system in real time, and it allows them to make smart choices. Okay, so that does it for this video on scheduling and routing. Really the main things that we touched upon were the optimization and how the system can help you build schedules that are efficient and are also tailored to your business model and aren't stock.